The alarm clock rang at 4:30 in the morning, just like it had for the past 19 years. He reached out from under the thin blanket and pressed the button to silence it. For a moment, he lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling of his small apartment. The paint was peeling in the corner near the window. He had been meaning to fix it for months now, but somehow he never got around to it. He was 52 years old. His name was not important to most people. To the students at Jefferson High School, he was simply the janitor, the man with the mop, the guy who cleaned up their messes and fixed the things they broke. They walked past him every single day without a second glance. Sometimes they did not even move out of his way when he was pushing his cart down the hallway. He had learned to step aside, to make himself smaller, to take up less space in the world. He got out of bed slowly. His back ached from years of bending and lifting. His knees were not what they used to be. He walked to the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. The face staring back at him was tired. There were deep lines around his eyes and gray hair at his temples. He barely recognized himself sometimes. He wondered where all the years had gone. After a quick shower and a cup of instant coffee, he put on his work uniform. It was a faded blue shirt with the school logo on the chest. The fabric was worn thin in some places, but it was clean. He always made sure it was clean. That was one thing he could control. He grabbed his keys and walked out into the cold morning air. The bus ride to work took 45 minutes. He sat in the same seat every day, near the back, by the window. He watched the city wake up around him. The coffee shops opening their doors. The early joggers making their rounds. The homeless man on the corner of 5th Street, who was always there, wrapped in a sleeping bag. He thought about how strange life was. How some people ended up in penthouses and others ended up on sidewalks. And most people, like him, ended up somewhere in between, invisible to almost everyone. He arrived at the school before 6 in the morning. The hallways were empty and quiet. This was his favorite time of day. Before the chaos. Before the noise. Before the thousands of footsteps and slamming lockers and shouting voices. In these early hours, the school belonged to him. He started his routine. Emptying trash cans. Mopping the cafeteria floor. Checking the bathrooms for any problems. Replacing paper towels and soap dispensers. It was not exciting work. It was not the kind of work that made people respect you. But it was honest work, and he did it well. He took pride in that, even if nobody noticed Dot by the time the first students started arriving. He had already been working for 3 hours. He watched them stream through the front doors. Teenagers with their backpacks and their phones and their entire lives ahead of them. They had no idea how lucky they were. They complained about homework and tests and drama with their friends. They had no idea what real problems looked like. He did not blame them. He had been young once, too. He had been full of dreams and hope and the belief that anything was possible. That felt like another lifetime now. Like it had happened to a different person entirely. What none of these students knew, what none of the teachers knew, what almost nobody in the world knew anymore, was that he had once been a pianist. Not just someone who played piano as a hobby. He had been truly gifted. At 17 years old, he had earned a full scholarship to one of the most respected music conservatories in the country. His teachers had said he had a rare talent, the kind that comes along once in a generation. They said he could have played in concert halls around the world. They said his name would be remembered, but life does not always care about talent. Life does not always follow the path you expect. When he was 21 years old, his father got sick. It was cancer, the doctor said. Advanced. There was nothing they could do except try to keep him comfortable. His mother had never worked outside the home. She did not know how to pay the bills or deal with the insurance companies, or handle any of the paperwork that came with dying in this country. so he left school. He came home. He got a job at a warehouse, loading boxes onto trucks for 12 hours a day. The money was not much, but it was something. He used it to pay for his father's medications, for the rent, for the groceries. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he would go back to music once things settled down. His father died 8 months later, and then his mother fell apart. She could not get out of bed most days. She stopped eating. She stopped talking. He could not leave her alone. So he stayed. He got another job, and then another. He worked double shifts and night shifts and weekend shifts. Music became something he thought about late at night when he was too tired to sleep. Years passed. His mother eventually got better, slowly. She moved in with her sister in another state. By then, he was 30 years old. He had not touched a piano in almost a decade. He told himself it was too late, that he had missed his chance, that dreams were for young people with time and money and freedom. He was none of those things anymore. He got the job at Jefferson High School when he was 33. It was supposed to be temporary, just like everything else. But temporary turned into 1 year, then 5 years, then 10. Before he knew it, he had been pushing that mop cart for nearly 2 decades. The students changed, but his life stayed the same. There was one thing he had never told anyone. A secret he kept locked away, like a treasure dot in the back corner of the school. Past the gymnasium and down a hallway that nobody ever used, there was an old music room. It had been abandoned years ago when the school cut funding for the arts program. The instruments were covered in dust. The chairs were stacked against the walls. But in the corner, there was an old upright piano. It was out of tune and some of the keys stuck, but it still worked every day. During his 30-minute lunch break, he would walk to that room. He would close the door behind him. He would sit down on the creaky bench, and he would play. He played Chopin and Beethoven and Debussy. He played pieces he had learned 30 years ago, pieces that lived in his fingers like muscle memory. He played with his eyes closed, letting the music wash over him like water. In those 30 minutes, he was not a janitor. He was not invisible. He was the person he was supposed to become. Nobody ever heard him. Nobody knew. That room was his sanctuary, his church, his secret garden. The only place in the world where he could be himself. He had accepted his life. He had made peace with his choices. He expected nothing to change. But sometimes life has other plans. Sometimes the universe decides to give you one more chance, even when you have stopped asking for it. And sometimes that chance comes from the last place you would ever expect. He just did not know it yet. Asterisk. It was a Tuesday morning in early March when he first saw the poster. It was taped to the wall outside the main office, bright yellow paper with big black letters. The school's annual talent show was coming up in 3 weeks. Students and staff were invited to participate. There would be prizes for the winners. The whole community was welcome to attend. He walked past it without stopping. Talent shows were for other people. Young people. People with something to prove and someone to impress. He was 52 years old. He had nothing to prove to anyone. He pushed his cart down the hallway and went back to work. But something strange happened over the next few days. He kept thinking about that poster. He would be mopping a floor or fixing a leaky faucet, and suddenly the image would pop into his head. Yellow paper. Black letters. Talent show. He did not understand why it bothered him so much. He had seen dozens of these posters over the years. They had never meant anything to him before. Maybe it was because he was getting older. Maybe it was because he had started to feel time slipping away from him, like sand through his fingers. Or maybe it was something else entirely. A voice deep inside him that had been quiet for 30 years, starting to whisper again. He ignored it. He was good at ignoring things. The other janitors found out about the talent show during their lunch break. There were 4 of them who worked at the school, and they usually ate together in the maintenance room. It was a small space with a table, some chairs, and a refrigerator that made a strange humming sound. One of the younger guys, a man in his 30s who had only been working there for a couple of years, brought it up first. He thought it was hilarious that the staff was invited to participate. He joked about doing a comedy routine or maybe a magic trick. The others laughed and threw out their own ridiculous ideas. A cooking demonstration. A dance number. Someone suggested they all go on stage together and do a synchronized mopping routine. And one of them looked at him. The oldest janitor. The quiet one who never said much during these conversations. Hey, what about you? The younger guy said. You got any hidden talents we do not know about? Everyone turned to look at him. He felt his face get warm. He shook his head and said no, nothing special. Just the usual stuff. He was not the performing type, but the younger guy would not let it go. Come on, he said. 19 years at this school, and you never once did anything for the talent show? There has to be something. Everyone has something. He thought about the old piano in the abandoned music room. He thought about the 30 minutes every day when he closed that door and let his fingers dance across the keys. He thought about Chopin and Beethoven and the music that lived inside him like a second heartbeat. He said nothing. He just shrugged and took another bite of his sandwich. The conversation moved on, but he could not stop thinking about it. That night, lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling and asked himself a question he had not asked in decades. What if? What if he signed up? What if he walked out on that stage and sat down at a piano in front of hundreds of people? What if he played, really played, the way he used to when he was young and full of fire? The thought terrified him, but it also made something flutter in his chest, something that felt almost like hope. The next day, he found himself standing in front of that yellow poster again. He read every word. Sign-ups were in the main office. The deadline was Friday. The show was on a Saturday night, 3 weeks away. He walked away. Then he walked back. Then he walked away again. This went on for 2 days. On Thursday afternoon, something inside him broke. Or maybe something inside him finally healed. He was not sure which. All he knew was that his feet carried him to the main office, and his hand picked up the pen, and his fingers wrote his name on the sign-up sheet. Under the column that said talent, he wrote one word, piano. He walked out of that office feeling like he might throw up. Word spread fast. By the next morning, it seemed like everyone in the school knew that the old janitor had signed up for the talent show. He heard the whispers in the hallways. He saw the looks on people's faces. Some of them were confused. Some of them were amused. A few of them were openly laughing. A group of students walked past him while he was emptying a trash can. One of them nudged the other and said something under his breath. They all burst out laughing. He pretended not to hear. He had been pretending not to hear things for 19 years. He was an expert at it by now. Even some of the teachers seemed surprised. One of them, a woman who taught history, stopped him in the hallway and asked if it was true. When he said yes, she smiled in a way that was probably meant to be encouraging, but felt more like pity. Well, she said, good for you for putting yourself out there. That takes courage. He thanked her and walked away. He wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The 3 weeks leading up to the show were some of the longest of his life. He kept going to the abandoned music room during his lunch breaks, but now his practice felt different. There was weight to it, purpose. He was not just playing for himself anymore. He was preparing for something. He chose a piece he had loved since he was 18 years old. It was complex and emotional and beautiful. It was the kind of piece that could make people cry if it was played the right way. He practiced it over and over until his fingers ached and his back was sore from sitting on that old bench at night. He lay awake and imagined all the ways it could go wrong. He could forget the notes. His hands could shake too much to play. The piano on stage could be out of tune or broken. Or worst of all, he could play perfectly and people could still laugh. They could still see him as nothing more than the janitor who thought he was special. The Saturday of the talent show arrived. He put on his cleanest clothes. A button-down shirt he had bought years ago for a wedding. Dark pants with no stains or holes. He even polished his shoes, though he was not sure anyone would notice. The auditorium was packed. Students, parents, teachers, members of the community. The noise was overwhelming. Hundreds of voices talking and laughing and filling the space with energy. He sat backstage with the other performers. There were students doing dance routines and comedy sketches and singing popular songs. They were young and confident and full of life. They belonged here. He felt like an intruder. His name was called. He stood up on shaking legs. He walked toward the stage. When he stepped out from behind the curtain, the room went quiet for a moment. Then the murmuring started. He could hear it spreading through the crowd like a wave. People leaning over to whisper to each other. A few giggles from somewhere in the middle rows. Someone in the back row laughed out loud, not even trying to hide it. He walked to the grand piano that sat in the center of the stage. It was beautiful, black and shiny and perfectly tuned. Nothing like the old upright in the music room. He pulled out the bench and sat down. The leather was cool against his legs. He looked out at the audience. Hundreds of faces staring back at him. Most of them expecting nothing. Some of them expecting a joke. A few of them already smirking, ready to laugh at the janitor who had forgotten his place. He placed his hands on the keys. They were trembling. His heart was pounding so hard, he could feel it in his throat. He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and then he began to play. The first note hung in the air like a question, soft, gentle, almost fragile. It floated out from the piano and drifted across the auditorium, reaching the back rows before fading into silence. Then came the second note, and the third. And suddenly, the music began to breathe. He had chosen one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano. It was a piece that told a story without words. A story of loss and longing and the kind of beauty that breaks your heart. He had first learned it when he was 18 years old, sitting in a practice room at the conservatory, with sunlight streaming through the window. His teacher had told him that this piece was not just about technique. It was about truth. You had to pour your entire soul into it, or it meant nothing. Back then, he had not fully understood what that meant. He was young. He had not yet known real loss. He had not yet felt his dreams slip away like water through his fingers. But now, 30 years later, he understood. He understood completely. His fingers moved across the keys like they had a mind of their own. The muscle memory was still there, buried deep inside him, waiting all these years to be released. He did not think about the notes. He did not think about the audience. He did not think about the whispers and the laughter and the smirks. He just played. The music started slow and melancholic. A single melody line, climbing and falling like a voice telling a secret. It was the sound of someone remembering something precious. Something lost. The notes were simple at first, but there was a weight to them. A sadness that seemed to seep into the walls. In the front row, a woman who had been checking her phone looked up. She put the phone down. Her eyes stayed on the man at the piano. He moved into the next section. The music grew more complex. His left hand began to dance alongside his right, creating harmonies that swelled and faded like waves on a shore. There was longing in these notes, the ache of things that could have been, the ghost of a life that was never lived, A teenage boy in the middle of the auditorium had been whispering to his friend when the performance started. Now he was silent. His mouth was slightly open. He had never heard anything like this before. He did not even know a piano could make sounds like this. The janitor played on. His eyes were still closed. He was not in the auditorium anymore. He was somewhere else entirely. He was 21 years old again, standing in the doorway of his childhood home, watching his father sleep in a hospital bed that had been set up in the living room. He was holding his mother while she cried. He was packing his bags to leave school, telling himself it was only temporary, knowing deep down that it was not. The music shifted. It grew darker, more urgent. His hands moved faster now, the notes tumbling over each other like a river rushing toward a waterfall. This was the section that always gave him chills. The section where everything builds and builds until you feel like you might burst. A teacher standing against the wall felt tears forming in her eyes. She did not know why. She barely knew this man. She had passed him in the hallways for years without really seeing him. But something about this music reached inside her and grabbed hold of something she had forgotten was there. He was playing the part now where the melody returns. But different, transformed. It was the same tune from the beginning. But now it carried the weight of everything that had come before. All the pain and struggle and loss. All the years of silence. All the mornings waking up at 4:30 to mop floors and clean toilets and be invisible. But there was something else in the music too. Something that surprised even him as it poured out of his fingers. There was hope. Not the bright, naive hope of youth, but a deeper kind. The hope that comes from surviving. The hope that says, I am still here. After everything, I am still here. The auditorium was completely silent now. Not a whisper, not a cough, not a single rustle of movement. 400 people sat frozen in their seats, barely breathing, as the janitor played like his life depended on it. And in a way, it did. He reached the final section of the piece. This was the part that separated good pianists from great ones. It required everything you had: technical skill, emotional depth, physical stamina. Your fingers had to fly across the keys while your heart stayed open and raw. He gave it everything. The notes cascaded like rain. They soared like birds. They crashed like thunder and whispered like prayers. He played 30 years of silence. He played 19 years of pushing a mop cart. He played every moment he had sat alone in that abandoned music room, pouring his heart into an out-of-tune piano with no one to hear. A woman in the third row had her hand pressed over her mouth. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. She did not even notice them. The principal sat in the center of the auditorium with her arms crossed. She had been skeptical when she saw the janitor's name on the list. She had almost asked him to reconsider, to spare himself the embarrassment. Now she sat motionless, her professional composure completely gone, feeling something crack open in her chest. The student who had laughed from the back row was not laughing anymore. He was staring at the stage with wide eyes, his face flushed with shame. He thought about all the times he had walked past this man without acknowledging him. All the times he had dropped trash on the floor, knowing someone else would clean it up. He thought about how easy it was to look at someone and see nothing. To assume you knew everything about a person just by looking at their uniform. The music built to its final climax. The notes rang out across the auditorium, like bells, like thunder, like the voice of something ancient and powerful and true. He was not holding anything back now. Every wall he had built around himself over the past 30 years came crashing down. And then, slowly, the storm began to fade. The notes grew softer, gentler. The melody returned one last time, quiet and tender, like a lullaby for a broken world. His fingers slowed. The music breathed its last breath. The final chord hung in the air. It was a sound of resolution, of peace, of a story that had finally been told. He lifted his hands from the keys. He opened his eyes. For a moment, there was absolute silence. The kind of silence that has weight to it. The kind that presses against your skin and fills your lungs. No one moved. No one spoke. The entire auditorium seemed to be holding its breath. He sat there at the piano, suddenly aware of where he was again. The bright lights, the rows of faces, the reality of what he had just done. His hands were trembling. His shirt was damp with sweat. He felt exposed in a way he had never felt before. Like he had just shown every person in that room the deepest, most hidden part of himself. The part he had kept locked away for 3 decades. He did not know what to do next. He did not know if he should stand up or stay seated. He did not know if he should bow or just walk off the stage. He had not thought this far ahead. He had been so focused on the playing that he had not considered what would come after God. The silence stretched on. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 dot, and then from somewhere in the middle of the auditorium, someone started to clap dot. It was a single pair of hands at first, slow and steady. Then another pair joined in, and another, dot. The applause spread like fire. It grew louder and louder until it filled the entire room. People were rising to their feet. First one row, then the next, then the entire auditorium. 400 people standing and clapping, and some of them crying, and all of them looking at the man at the piano, like they were seeing him for the very first time. Because they were. He sat frozen at the bench, overwhelmed, unable to process what was happening. The sound washed over him like a wave, like a dream, like something that could not possibly be real, but it was real. All of it, every single moment, and his life would never be the same again. The applause would not stop. It kept going and going, rolling through the auditorium like thunder that refused to fade. He sat at the piano bench with his hands in his lap, not knowing what to do with himself. His legs felt weak. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Finally, he forced himself to stand. His knees almost gave out, but he caught himself on the edge of the piano. He turned to face the audience, and what he saw took his breath away. Everyone was standing. Every single person. Teachers he had worked alongside for years. Students who had never looked at him twice. Parents who did not even know his name. They were all on their feet, clapping, some of them wiping tears from their eyes. He did not know what to do. He had never taken a bow in his life. So he just stood there, nodding slightly, his eyes scanning the crowd in disbelief. A small, uncertain smile found its way to his lips. It felt strange on his face, like a muscle he had forgotten how to use. The applause finally began to die down. People started to sit back in their seats. The host of the talent show, a young teacher with a microphone, walked onto the stage looking just as stunned as everyone else. She opened her mouth to introduce the next act, but for a moment, no words came out. She just looked at him, shook her head slowly, and whispered something that the microphone barely caught. That was incredible. He walked off the stage in a daze. His feet carried him backstage, past the other performers who were waiting for their turn. They stared at him as he passed. A girl who was about to do a dance routine reached out and touched his arm. "That was amazing," she said. Her eyes were wide with genuine admiration. He thanked her quietly and kept walking. He found a corner backstage where no one else was standing. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. His whole body was shaking, not from fear anymore, from something else, something he could not name. It was like a dam had broken inside him, and everything he had held back for 30 years was flooding out all at once. He stayed backstage for the rest of the show. He could hear the other performances happening on the other side of the curtain. Singing, dancing, comedy acts. The audience clapped for each one. But even from where he was standing, he could tell it was different. The applause was polite, appreciative. Not like what had happened after he played. When the show ended, the host announced the winners. Third place went to a group of students who had performed a hip-hop dance. Second place went to a girl with a beautiful singing voice. And first place, to no one's surprise, went to him. He walked back onto the stage to accept the small trophy they handed him. The audience erupted again. More standing. More clapping. He held the trophy awkwardly, not sure if he should say something or just leave. He settled for a quiet thank you into the microphone and walked off as quickly as he could. That was when everything changed. People started approaching him the moment he stepped off the stage. First, it was the principal, who took his hand in both of hers and looked at him with something close to wonder. "In 19 years, she said, I had no idea. Why did you never tell anyone?" He shrugged. He did not have an answer. Or maybe he had too many answers, and none of them felt right. Then came the teachers. One after another, they walked up to him with the same look of shock on their faces. They asked questions he did not know how to answer. Where did you learn to play like that? Have you always been this talented? Why are you working as a janitor? He tried to explain, but the words felt clumsy in his mouth. It was a long time ago, he said. Life happened. Things changed. The students were the hardest. A group of them gathered around him near the exit doors, their phones out, their faces glowing with excitement. One of them, a boy who he recognized from the hallways, asked if he could take a picture with him. He did not know how to say no, so he said yes. They crowded around him, smiling for the camera. He stood stiffly in the middle, still holding the trophy, looking like he had accidentally wandered into someone else's life. Someone told him that they had recorded his entire performance. Multiple people, actually. The video was already being shared in group chats and posted on social media. By the time he got home that night, it had already been viewed over 1,000 times. He did not have social media himself. He barely knew how it worked. But his neighbor's daughter, a college student who lived in the apartment next door, knocked on his door the next morning to tell him what was happening. She showed him her phone, scrolling through comments from strangers. They were using words like genius and incredible, and who is this man? He stared at the screen, not fully understanding. This was his performance. That was him sitting at the piano. But it felt like watching a stranger, like looking at a version of himself that he had buried a long time ago. Over the next few days, the video spread further than he ever could have imagined. Someone uploaded it to a bigger platform. Then another. Then another. The views climbed from thousands to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. News stations started calling the school, asking for interviews. A reporter showed up at his apartment building, but he did not answer the door at work. Everything was different. Students who had never acknowledged him before now stopped to say hello. They smiled at him in the hallways. They asked if he would play something else sometime. A few of them even apologized, though they did not say exactly what they were apologizing for. He knew anyway. The other janitors did not know how to act around him anymore. They treated him like he was suddenly a different person. During lunch, they asked him questions about his past, about the conservatory, about why he had given it all up. He answered as best as he could, but some things were hard to explain to people who had not lived them. The principal called him into her office on a Wednesday afternoon. He expected her to talk about the media attention, maybe ask him to do an interview for the school newsletter, or something like that. Instead, she offered him something he never saw coming. The school was reviving its music program. Budget cuts had killed it years ago, but recent donations and community interest had made it possible again. They needed someone to run it, someone to teach piano, someone to help students discover the same gift that he had been hiding for 3 decades. She asked if he would be interested. He sat in the chair across from her desk, unable to speak. His mind went back to all those years ago, when his teacher at the conservatory had told him he could do great things, when doors were open and the future seemed limitless. Before his father got sick, before everything fell apart, he thought about the abandoned music room, the dusty old piano, the 30 minutes of stolen joy that had kept him alive all these years. And then he thought about what it might feel like to share that joy with someone else, to sit next to a student and watch their fingers find the keys for the first time, to help them discover something beautiful inside themselves, to give them the gift that had once been given to him. He looked at the principal. She was waiting patiently, her hands folded on the desk. He said yes. It was one of the easiest decisions he had ever made, and also one of the hardest, because saying yes meant letting go of the identity he had carried for so long. The invisible man, the janitor, the one who kept his head down and expected nothing. He was not that man anymore. And honestly, he was not sure who he was supposed to be instead. But for the first time in 30 years, he was ready to find out. 6 months later, he stood in a room that had once been forgotten. The same room where he used to eat his lunch alone, playing an out-of-tune piano with no one to hear. But it did not look the same anymore. The dusty chairs had been replaced with new ones. The old upright piano had been moved to the corner, and in its place stood a beautiful grand piano, donated by a local business owner who had seen the viral video. The walls had been painted a warm shade of blue. Sunlight poured through the windows that someone had finally cleaned. This was his classroom now. He arrived every morning at 7, an hour before the students. He liked having that quiet time to himself. He would sit at the grand piano and play softly, just like he used to. But now it was different. Now he was not hiding. He was preparing, getting ready for the young people who would walk through that door, eager to learn something they had never tried before. The first few weeks of teaching had been terrifying. He had no formal training as a teacher. He did not know about lesson plans or grading rubrics or any of the official things that educators were supposed to know. All he had was his love for music and his desire to share it. But somehow, that was enough. He started with the basics. How to sit at the piano, how to position your hands, how to read the notes on a page and turn them into sound. He was patient in a way he had not known he could be. When a student struggled, he did not get frustrated. He remembered what it felt like to be young and uncertain. He remembered his own teacher, all those years ago, who had believed in him when he did not believe in himself. Now it was his turn to be that person for someone else. The students surprised him. He had expected them to be distracted, bored, checking their phones under the desks. But most of them genuinely wanted to learn. They came to his classroom with curiosity in their eyes. They asked questions. They practiced. They made mistakes and tried again. There was one student in particular who reminded him of himself. A quiet boy who sat in the back row and rarely spoke. He came from a difficult home, one of the other teachers had told him. His father was not in the picture, and his mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. The boy had signed up for the music class on a whim, not expecting much. But from the very first lesson, something clicked. The boy had a natural gift. His fingers found the keys like they belonged there. He picked up new pieces faster than anyone else in the class. And when he played, his whole face changed. The tension melted away. The walls came down. For those few minutes, he was free. He saw so much of his younger self in that boy. The talent, the hunger, the quiet desperation to be seen. He made a point to spend extra time with him after class, teaching him more advanced techniques, lending him books about music theory, encouraging him to dream bigger than his circumstances. One afternoon, the boy stayed behind after everyone else had left. He stood by the piano, fidgeting with the strap of his backpack, looking like he wanted to say something, but could not find the words. Finally, he spoke. He asked why. Why did you give it up? You could have been famous. You could have played anywhere in the world. Why did you stop? It was a question he had asked himself 1,000 times over the years. He thought about giving the boy a simple answer, something about responsibility and sacrifice, and doing what needed to be done. But that did not feel honest enough, so he told the truth. He said that sometimes life does not go the way you plan, that sometimes you have to make choices that break your heart, that he had spent a long time being angry and sad and wondering what could have been. But somewhere along the way, he realized that the music never really left him. It was always there waiting. And maybe the path he took was longer and harder than he expected, but it still led him here, to this room, to these students, to this moment. The boy listened quietly. Then he nodded, like he understood something important. Before he left, he turned back and said thank you. Not just for the lessons, but for showing him that it was possible. That dreams did not have to die just because life got hard. That you could lose everything and still find your way back. He watched the boy walk out the door, and he felt something warm spread through his chest. It was not pride, exactly. It was something deeper. A sense that all those years of struggle had not been wasted. That they had led him to this place where he could make a difference in someone else's life. The video of his performance had been viewed over 15 million times now. He still did not fully understand how the internet worked, but he knew that people all over the world had watched him play. They had left comments in languages he could not read. They had shared his story with their friends and families. Some of them had written to the school, telling their own stories of dreams they had given up and talents they had buried. Few news stations had done stories about him. They called him things like the janitor who stunned the world and the hidden genius of Jefferson High. He did not love the attention, but he understood why people were drawn to the story. It was not really about him. It was about the idea that anyone could be more than they appeared, that the person you walk past every day without noticing might be carrying something extraordinary inside them. He still cleaned up sometimes, not because he had to, but because old habits were hard to break. He would see a piece of trash in the hallway and pick it up without thinking. He would notice a spill in the cafeteria and grab a mop before anyone asked. Some of the students found this funny. Their music teacher, the one who had gone viral, still acting like a janitor. But he did not see it that way. He had never been ashamed of the work he did. It was honest work. It mattered. The only thing that had changed was that now people saw him. They knew his name. They understood that he was a full person with a past and a story, and a gift that had been waiting in the shadows. At the end of the school year, there was another talent show. This time, he did not perform. Instead, he sat in the front row of the auditorium and watched his students take the stage. One by one, they played the pieces they had been practicing all semester. Some of them were nervous. Some of them made mistakes. But all of them tried. And when that quiet boy from the back row sat down at the piano and began to play, the room went silent, just like it had for him all those months ago. The boy played with everything he had. His eyes were closed. His fingers danced across the keys. And for a few beautiful minutes, he was not a kid from a broken home with nothing to his name. He was an artist. He was free. The audience erupted into applause. The boy stood up and bowed, a shy smile on his face. He looked out at the crowd, and his eyes found his teacher sitting in the front row. Their eyes met. The boy nodded once, a small gesture that said everything, and he nodded back. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, he sat alone in his classroom. The building was quiet. The hallways were empty. He placed his hands on the piano keys and played softly, just for himself. He thought about the strange journey that had brought him here. The years of silence. The night he almost did not sign up. The moment he walked onto that stage, terrified, certain he was about to be humiliated. And now this. He did not know what the future held. He did not know if he would teach for 1 more year or 20. He did not know if that quiet boy would become a famous pianist or choose a different path entirely. But he knew one thing for certain, it was never too late. Not for him. Not for anyone. The music had waited 30 years for him to come back, and it would wait for others, too. All they had to do was play.